The Galactic Council had made their decision after 3 cycles of deliberation in their crystalline halls above the planet Zenthar Prime. The verdict was unanimous and final. Humanity would be eliminated from the universe. Every single human being across all their worlds would be wiped out within the next 30 days. The Council representatives from 47 different civilizations had voted without a single voice of opposition. They had watched the humans for 50 years now, and they had seen enough. These creatures were too violent, and too unpredictable and too dangerous to be allowed to spread among the stars. Commander. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Deep Space Research vessel Horizon's Edge, and he had no idea that his entire species had just been sentenced to death. For 2 years, he and his crew of 47 men and women had been out here in the darkness cataloging stellar phenomena in the outer rim. They were so far beyond the reach of normal communications that they relied on data, packets sent every few weeks. The last packet had arrived 6 days ago, and everything had seemed normal back home on Earth. Lieutenant Sophie Grant was monitoring the sensor arrays when she noticed something strange appearing on her screens. 12 massive signatures were dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of their system. Each one was the size of a small moon, and the energy readings were completely unlike anything in their databases. She called out to Jake, and he moved to her station immediately. The readings made no sense at all. Nothing human could generate that much power, and nothing natural moved in formations that precise. Ryan Clark was the communications officer, and he was the first to receive the transmission. It came in on every frequency simultaneously, and it was being broadcast in every human language at the same time. His hands started shaking as he decoded the message and put it on the main speakers. The voice was cold and mechanical, and it spoke with absolute authority. The Galactic Council had been observing humanity since Earth's first faster-than-light experiments created detectable ripples across known space 50 years ago. They had studied human history and human behavior and human culture. Their conclusion was clear and without room for debate. Humans were a threat to galactic peace and stability. The species was too aggressive and too warlike and too willing to solve problems through violence. Therefore, the Council had authorized the complete extermination of humanity. The fleet was already moving toward Earth and all human colonies. Estimated time of arrival was 14 days. There would be no negotiation and no mercy and no second chances. The bridge went completely silent for a long moment. Dr. Lisa Carter was the ship's xenobiologist, and she broke the silence first by pulling up every record they had of potential alien contact over the past 50 years. Her voice was shaking as she worked through the files. There had been rumors for years about unexplained things happening in deep space. Probes that disappeared without explanation, ships that went silent and were never heard from again, colony stations that reported strange sensor readings right before all contact was lost. Everyone had assumed it was equipment failure or cosmic accidents or simple bad luck. Now they knew the truth. The aliens had been out here all along, and they had been watching and studying and judging humanity. Jake felt his mind racing through the implications. They had been evaluated like laboratory animals and found wanting. Some alien civilization had decided that humans were too dangerous to exist, and now they were coming to eliminate the problem. He looked around at his crew and saw the same shock and fear on every face. These were scientists and engineers and explorers who had signed up to study the wonders of the universe. None of them had ever expected to be fighting for the survival of their entire species. Paul Henderson was the chief engineer, and he was trying to establish contact with Earth, but every communication channel was completely dead. The Council had deployed some kind of suppression field that was blocking all transmissions back to human space. They could receive the Council's message, but they could not send any warning home. Earth would have no idea what was coming until the alien fleet arrived in orbit. By then, it would be far too late to mount any kind of defense. Jake Morrison had not survived 3 tours in Earth's outer colony's defense force by giving up when things looked impossible. He had been in tight situations before, and he had learned that the only way out was to think differently than your enemy expected. If the Council thought humanity would just wait quietly for extinction, then they were about to get their first education in human stubbornness. He asked Ryan if there was any way to penetrate the suppression field with a narrow beam transmission. Ryan checked his systems and shook his head. The field was too dense and too sophisticated. There was no way through it with their current technology. Jake thought for a moment, and then he smiled. They did not need to go through the field if they could go around it. He turned to Helen Price, who was their navigator, and told her to plot a course using the gravitational lens of the nearest pulsar. They were going to slingshot a message probe at speeds that would make their sensors think it was just cosmic radiation. The probe would carry all the data they had on the Council fleet, including their formation patterns and energy signatures and tactical information. It might reach Earth before the attack began, or it might not, but they had to try. The crew looked at Jake with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Sophie asked the obvious question about what they were supposed to do after they launched the probe. They were one small research vessel against 12 massive warships. They had mining equipment and sensor arrays and scientific instruments, but they had no weapons at all. Ryan pointed out that there were 47 species in that council, and they were just 47 humans on one ship. The odds were not exactly in their favor. Jake Morrison stood up straight and his expression became hard as steel. He told them that if the council wanted to exterminate humanity, then they should have brought more ships. He ordered Sophie to analyze every weakness she could find in their fleet formation. He told Lisa to dig through every piece of data they had on alien biology and technology. If the council had been watching humans for 50 years, then humans had been watching the universe too, even if they had not known what they were seeing. There had to be something they could use. The Horizon's Edge changed course and headed not away from the council fleet but directly toward it. Paul Henderson started converting their mining charges into weapons. Lisa Carter began analyzing the alien ship designs for vulnerabilities. Sophie Grant plotted attack patterns that no sane pilot would attempt. Ryan Clark prepared to launch their warning probe. And Jake Morrison prepared to teach the Galactic Council their first lesson about humanity. They were about to learn that humans did not die quietly and they did not give up easily. And they definitely did not go down without a fight. The Council Warmaster was a towering being named Thexular from the warrior caste of Dravix Prime, and he watched the scanner displays with 3 of his 4 eyes. The small human vessel was approaching his fleet in a direct line, and it was coming alone. His tactical advisor was a crystalline Vex entity that communicated through pulses of light, and it suggested that the humans were coming to surrender. The advisor said their species must have recognized the futility of resistance against such overwhelming force. Thexular was not convinced at all. He had spent months reviewing the human databases during the observation period, and what he saw troubled him deeply. This species had words and concepts that other civilized races had abandoned thousands of years ago. They had a word for facing impossible odds, and they called it courage. They had another word for refusing to accept defeat, and they called it stubbornness. They had a phrase that appeared throughout their military history, and it said, "Come and take it." Those 3 words worried him more than he wanted to admit to his crew. On the Horizon's Edge, the crew worked with desperate precision, and no one had slept in over 30 hours. Paul Henderson had spent every minute in the engineering bay converting their mining charges into something far more deadly. The ship's original purpose was to break apart asteroids for mineral analysis, and the charges were designed to fracture rock with shaped explosions. Now those same charges would be used against alien warships, and Paul had modified each one with specific frequency emitters. Dr. Lisa Carter had assembled all the crew in the briefing room to explain what she had discovered. She told them that they had one critical advantage over the Council fleet. The Council species had been at peace for 6,000 years according to their own broadcasts. They had dealt with pirates occasionally, and they had handled rogue colonies from time to time, but they had not experienced real war. Not the kind of total war that humanity had perfected over 10,000 years of killing each other. She pulled up holographic displays showing each Council species and their known characteristics. The Dravix were incredibly strong, but they relied on heavy armor, which made them slow. The Vex had powerful energy weapons, but their crystalline structure made them vulnerable to specific resonance frequencies. The Kelthans had superior shields, but their close range sensors were notably poor. Sophie Grant added that humans had been fighting each other for their entire history, and they knew war in ways that peaceful species could never understand. They knew how to find weaknesses and exploit them. They knew how to use their enemies' strengths against them. They knew how to survive when survival seemed impossible. The Council had forgotten all of this because they had not needed it for thousands of years. Jake Morrison studied the tactical display and saw exactly what he needed to see. The Council fleet was arranged in a standard formation that was textbook perfect for overwhelming a stationary target. But the Horizon's Edge was not going to be stationary. He ordered Helen to take them in using attack pattern Delta 7. Helen's fingers moved across her console and the ship dove toward the Council fleet at maximum speed. Then suddenly they broke into a corkscrew pattern that pushed the inertial dampeners to their absolute limits. The G-forces pressed everyone into their seats and several crew members blacked out for a few seconds. The Council fleet opened fire with massive energy beams that lit up space like artificial suns. Their targeting computers were extremely sophisticated and designed to hit ships that maneuvered in predictable patterns. But humans did not do predictable, and Helen was flying like she was drunk. The beams cut through space where the horizon's edge had been microseconds before, but they never quite connected with the wildly spinning ship. Ryan Clark launched the first salvo of modified mining charges, and each one was emitting the specific resonance frequencies that Lisa had calculated. The charges sailed past the Council ships and seemed to miss by kilometers. The Council tactical officers barely registered them as threats because they were moving away from the fleet. Then the charges detonated behind the formation, and the resonance waves rippled forward at the speed of sound through the thin space medium. The waves hit the Vex crystalline ships and their hulls began to vibrate at their natural frequency. Within seconds, the vibrations built to critical levels and the crystal structures shattered like glass struck by a hammer. 3 Council vessels turned into expanding clouds of glittering fragments, and their crews died instantly. Thexelar roared in his native language, and his translator struggled to keep up with his battle-rage dialect. He demanded to know what kind of sorcery the humans were using. His advisor reported that the humans had deployed acoustic weapons, which their databases said were primitive technology abandoned centuries ago. Thexelar understood immediately what had happened. The humans had lied, or at least they had hidden their true capabilities. They had been preparing for this moment even if they did not know when it would come. The Horizon's Edge was not finished with its attack run. Paul Henderson opened the cargo bay doors and released hundreds of small metal spheres. The Council sensors identified them as simple metal balls with no power signatures and no propulsion systems. They seemed completely harmless, and several Council officers laughed at the primitive attempt at warfare. But those officers stopped laughing when the spheres reached their targets. The metal balls were moving at relativistic speeds, and at those velocities even a small piece of metal had devastating kinetic energy. The spheres punched through the Kelthan shields like they were not even there, because the shields were designed to stop sophisticated energy weapons and guided missiles. They were not designed to stop simple hunks of metal moving at a significant fraction of light speed. 2 more Council ships went dark, as hundreds of small holes appeared in their hulls. The holes vented atmosphere and crew into the void of space. Internal bulkheads failed under the pressure differences and entire sections of the ships collapsed. The Kelthan crews tried to seal the breaches, but there were too many holes and not enough time. Sophie reported that 5 ships were down and 42 remained operational. Jake Morrison knew they could not win this fight through simple mathematics. That was not the point of what they were doing. The point was to make the Council bleed and to make them understand that humanity would not go quietly into extinction. He asked Ryan if they were recording everything, and Ryan confirmed that every moment of the battle was being captured. Every tactical decision the Council made and every weakness they revealed was being stored in the data core. Jake told them to prepare the data core for emergency ejection. If the Horizon's Edge went down, then their last message would still get through to Earth. The data would show their people exactly how to fight these aliens. It would show them what worked and what did not work. It would give Earth a fighting chance. In the Council flagship, Thexelar watched as the human ship danced between his vessels like a mosquito, avoiding swatting hands. The ship struck and retreated and struck again, using his own fleet's size and numbers against them. He had eliminated species before as part of his duties to the Council. He had destroyed threats to galactic peace, and he had done it without hesitation or regret. But he had never fought anyone who understood warfare the way these humans did. They were not just fighting to survive, but fighting to teach and to warn and to prepare their people back home. He ordered his communications officer to send a priority message back to the Council chambers. He told them that the humans were far more dangerous than initial assessments had indicated. He said they would need the full invasion fleet brought to bear. His advisor pulsed with confusion and asked why they needed more ships to deal with one small research vessel. Thexelar stared at the display where the Horizon's Edge had just destroyed another Council ship, with an improvised electromagnetic pulse. He said they were not fighting a ship, but fighting what that ship represented. They were fighting a species that had spent 10,000 years learning how to kill, and that knowledge was far more dangerous than any weapon. President Margaret Fuller stood in the war room deep beneath Washington, and she was surrounded by military commanders from every nation on Earth. The message had finally reached them, carried by the data core that the Horizon's Edge had managed to eject before the Council fleet destroyed their ship. Jake Morrison and his entire crew were gone, but their final transmission had given Earth something precious beyond measure. They had given them time and knowledge, and most importantly, they had given them hope. General Alex Parker was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and he looked at the countdown timer on the main display. He told everyone they had 14 hours before the Council fleet would arrive in Earth orbit. That was all the time they had to prepare for the end of the world, or the beginning of humanity's greatest fight. President Fuller asked what assets they had available, and her voice was steady, even though her hands were shaking. Admiral Kate Sullivan pulled up a holographic display that showed every military vessel in human space. Every combat ship was being recalled from patrol routes and training exercises and deep space assignments. The Lunar Defense Network had been brought to full power, and all weapon systems were armed and ready. The Mars garrison had been activated, and every ship and soldier stationed on the Red Planet was preparing for battle. She gave the final count and said they had 317 combat-capable ships. Someone in the back of the room said quietly that the Council was bringing 4,000 vessels. Margaret looked around at all the faces staring at her, and she told them that they would make every single ship count. She said that in a few hours every human being would know that they were not alone in the universe. They would know that aliens existed, and they would know that those aliens wanted humanity dead. She said they needed to show the galaxy why that was the biggest mistake anyone had ever made. Dr. Richard Hayes was the Secretary of Defense, and he stepped forward with the data from Commander Morrison's final transmission. He said the data included detailed analysis of Council technology and tactics. He admitted that the Council was superior to humanity in almost every measurable way. Their ships were faster, and their weapons were stronger, and their shields were better. But they had weaknesses, and the Horizon's Edge had found some of those weaknesses and paid for that knowledge with their lives. General Carlos Rivera represented the South American Alliance, and he said that humanity's entire history was about overcoming superior enemies. Smaller tribes had defeated larger armies, and weaker nations had outlasted stronger empires. He said the Council had made one critical error in their planning. They had given humanity a common enemy, and for the first time in human history, every nation stood together without question or hesitation. Old enemies became allies in a matter of hours. Resources were shared without bureaucracy or negotiation. The people of Earth had 12 hours to prepare, and they used every single second. In Beijing, engineers worked frantically to weaponize everything they could find. Construction mechs that were designed to build skyscrapers became mobile weapon platforms. Orbital satellites that were meant for communications became kinetic bombardment systems. Even civilian cargo ships were retrofitted with whatever weapons could be mounted to their hulls. In Mumbai, Dr. Priya Sharma led a team of programmers to create a computer virus based on the data from the Horizon's Edge. The data included partial decryption, keys for Council communication protocols. If they could get the virus into the Council network, it might buy them a few precious seconds of confusion. In Moscow, mathematicians calculated firing solutions for weapons that had never been tested in combat. In Tokyo, factories that built cars retooled their assembly lines in hours to produce missiles. In New York, programmers wrote control algorithms for drone swarms that would fight with human unpredictability instead of logical patterns. Captain Danny Foster was commanding the defense frigate Liberty Bell in lunar orbit, and he looked at his crew as they took their positions. The average age was 24, and most of them had been training cadets just 3 months ago. Now they were Earth's front line, and they would probably be the first ones to die when the Council fleet arrived. Danny activated the ship-wide communication system and told his crew that he would not lie to them. He said they were probably going to die today because the Council had better ships and better weapons and better everything. But the Council did not have what humans had, and they did not have 4 billion years of evolution that taught them to survive against all odds. They did not have 10,000 years of history where they fought for every inch of ground. They did not have the human spirit that said, "When you hit us, we hit back twice as hard." He paused and looked at all the young faces around him. He told them that Commander Morrison and his crew had bought them time with their lives. He said they needed to make sure those people did not die for nothing. He said they would show the galaxy what humanity really meant and what happened when you tried to exterminate a species that refused to quit. Above Earth, the Council fleet emerged from faster than light travel right on schedule. 4,000 ships appeared in formation, and each one was a masterpiece of technology that represented thousands of years of advancement. Each one was crewed by species that had forgotten what real war meant because they had lived in peace for so long. Thexler stood on his flagship bridge and looked down at the blue and green planet below. He sent the standard terms of surrender that gave the humans 1 hour to evacuate to the surface. After that hour, the Council would begin planetary bombardment that would sterilize the entire planet. His advisor reported that they were detecting massive energy signatures all around Earth. The humans had armed every satellite and every ship and every defense platform they had. Everything that could hold a weapon was now pointing at the Council fleet. Thexler said that the humans could not win against such overwhelming numbers. But he remembered the horizon's edge and how 47 humans had destroyed 8 Council ships before being overwhelmed. He did the mathematics in his head and felt something his species had not experienced in thousands of years. He felt doubt about the outcome of this battle. On Earth, Margaret Fuller stood before every camera in the world. Her message was broadcast to every screen and every device and every surface that could display an image. She told the people of Earth that in a few minutes they would be attacked by an alien force that wanted to erase them from existence. She said the aliens thought humans were too dangerous to live. She said they thought humans were too violent to be allowed among the stars. She said they were about to learn the truth about humanity, and it would be a lesson they never forgot. She paused, and her expression became fierce and determined. She said that humans did not die easily, and they never forgot a wrong done to them. The countdown reached 0, and the Council fleet opened fire. Earth fired back with everything they had. The battle for humanity's survival had begun, and the galaxy was watching. The first wave of Council bombardment lit up Earth's sky like a second sunrise that burned across the darkness of space. Orbital defense platforms erupted in flowers of fire and debris that scattered in all directions. The Lunar Defense Network responded immediately with massive railguns that hurled tungsten rods at speeds that made them nearly invisible. The rods struck Council ships with the force of nuclear weapons and punched through their shields like they were made of paper. Captain Danny Foster watched 3 ships in his formation disintegrate under Council fire before the Liberty Bell even got a single shot off. He ordered all batteries to fire at will and told his crew to target the command ships that were directing the Council formations. The human fleet swarmed the Council vessels like angry hornets attacking a bear. Individually, each human ship was outmatched and outgunned, but they did not fight as individuals. They fought as a coordinated swarm that struck from multiple angles simultaneously. Colonel Amy Wright commanded a wing of atmospheric fighters that had no business being in space combat. The fighters were designed to operate in air, not in vacuum, but the engineers had strapped rocket boosters and weapon pods to anything that could fly. Her squadron dove between Council ships using them as cover and firing at point-blank range where the enemy shields were weakest. She called out over the radio that she had weapon lock and launched missiles directly into the exposed engine ports of a Dravix destroyer. The destroyer's engines exploded and sent the massive ship spinning out of control into another Council vessel. Both ships collided in a catastrophic explosion that took out a third ship in the expanding debris field. On the ground, people watched the battle through telescopes and video feeds that showed the horror unfolding in orbit. Children were rushed to underground shelters while their parents reported to militia stations. The elderly armed themselves with hunting rifles and shotguns, knowing the weapons would be useless against alien technology, but refusing to die without some kind of fight. Everyone understood that if the defense fleet failed, then the Council would begin bombardment, and there would be nowhere to hide. In the Council flagship, Thexler watched the tactical display with growing horror that he could not hide from his crew. He demanded to know why the humans were not retreating as any sensible species would. His advisor's light pulses were frantic as it reported that they had lost 237 ships already. The advisor said the humans were using suicide tactics and ramming their damaged vessels into Council ships when they ran out of ammunition. Another Council officer said the tactic was barbaric and uncivilized. Thexler corrected him and said the tactic was effective, and that was all that mattered in war. He had studied human history during the observation period, and he had read about kamikaze pilots in Last Stands. He had read about Thermopylae and the Alamo in Stalingrad, and 100 other battles where humans fought to the last. He had thought those stories were exaggerations or propaganda meant to inspire future generations. Now he understood that every word had been true. The Liberty Bell had her hull breached in a dozen places and atmosphere was venting from every wound. Half the crew was dead and the other half was injured. Danny Foster sat in his captain's chair with blood running down his face from a deep cut on his forehead. He ordered all hands to abandon ship and get to the escape pods immediately. His executive officer reported that the escape pods were damaged beyond repair and no one was going anywhere. Danny looked at his remaining crew and counted 8 people. 8 young men and women who had signed up to explore the stars and not to die defending Earth from aliens. He told them they would go out on their own terms like humans always did. He ordered engineering to give him everything the engines had left. He told the helm to plot a ramming course into the nearest Council cruiser. The responses came back steady and sure without hesitation or fear. The Liberty Bell accelerated on her damaged engines that screamed in protest. The Council cruiser's point defense systems tried to stop the incoming ship, but there was too much debris and too much chaos in the battle space. The human ship struck at full speed and her fusion core breached on impact. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface as a bright star that flared and died, taking the Council cruiser with it. Margaret Fuller watched the battle from the war room and saw the red icons of human ships disappear from the display one by one. Each icon represented a crew and lives and someone's family member or friend. The price of survival was being written in fire and blood across the sky. Admiral Kate Sullivan reported that the Mars garrison had launched their attack and caught the Council's reserve fleet completely by surprise. The Council had not expected an attack from behind because they thought all human forces were concentrated around Earth. On Mars, Commander Victor Hayes led every ship the Red Planet had in a desperate charge. They had hidden behind Mars until the perfect moment, and then struck at the Council's rear formations with everything they had. Mars did not have Earth's numbers or resources, but they had creativity and desperation. The Martian ships carried payloads of refined iron oxide, which was red dust from the planet's surface. They released the dust in massive clouds that fouled sensors and clogged intake ports on the Council ships. While the Council vessels were effectively blind, the Martians picked them off with precision strikes that targeted critical systems. Dr. Priya Sharma's computer virus finally penetrated the Council network after hours of trying to break through their security. The virus did not shut down their systems because human technology was not sophisticated enough for that, but it did something arguably worse by making their weapons target random ships, including their own vessels. For 30 seconds, the Council fleet descended into complete chaos as ships fired on each other while trying to override the corrupted targeting systems. In those 30 seconds, the human fleet destroyed over 100 Council vessels that were too busy fighting their own computers to defend themselves. Thexuler roared in frustration and anger that shook the bridge. The humans were supposed to be primitive and disorganized and easy to eliminate. Instead, they were fighting with a ferocity and cunning that his people had not seen in thousands of years. He ordered his fleet to fall back to defensive formation and regroup at the outer marker. His advisor pulsed that falling back would be seen as retreat. Thexuler snapped back that falling back would mean survival, and survival was more important than pride. He ordered his communications officer to signal the Council chambers and tell them they needed reinforcements immediately. He told them to say that the humans were not what anyone had thought they were, but the message would take time to reach the Council and time to get a response. Time that Earth would use to repair and rearm and prepare for the next wave. As the Council fleet withdrew, they were battered and diminished and shocked. The humans did not celebrate their victory because they knew this was only the beginning. They counted their dead and repaired what could be repaired and prepared for round 2. They had won the first battle, but the war was far from over and everyone knew the Council would come back stronger. 6 days after the first battle, the Council's reinforcement fleet arrived with overwhelming numbers that made the first attack seem small. This time they brought not 4,000 ships but 8,000 vessels. The Council had committed nearly half their total military might to humanity's extinction, and they were not going to fail again. Thexuler stood on his flagship bridge looking at the depleted human fleet that remained in orbit. Of the 317 ships Earth had started with, fewer than 60 remained operational. The mathematics was simple and brutal. This time there would be no escape for the humans. He sent the final terms of surrender to Earth and told them it was unconditional. If they complied immediately, the Council would allow the species to live under permanent quarantine on their homeworld. They would never be allowed to leave Earth again, and they would be monitored for the rest of their existence. The response from Earth came quickly, and it was not from President Fuller but from Admiral Kate Sullivan, who was now commanding the defense fleet from the heavy cruiser Indomitable. She told the Council they could take their terms and shove them into the nearest black hole. She said humanity would die free before they lived in a cage. Thexelar felt something unexpected wash over him, and it took a moment to recognize the emotion as admiration. He told his fleet to prepare for the final assault that would end this war once and for all. But before the Council fleet could advance, every scanner in both fleets detected massive energy signatures appearing at the edge of the system. Dozens of signatures appeared, and then hundreds of them. Ships of designs that nobody had seen before emerged from faster-than-light travel, and they were broadcasting on frequencies that made the Council's translator system scream in protest. On the Indomitable Communications Officer Lauren Garcia struggled to decode the incoming message. She told Admiral Kate that she was getting something, but it was fragmented and hard to understand. She said she thought the unknown ships were saying they were here to help humanity. Kate demanded to know who they were, and Lauren said she had no idea, but their energy signatures were off. The charts compared to anything human or Council. The newcomer fleet positioned itself between Earth and the Council forces like a living shield. One ship that was larger than any vessel in the system broadcast a message that both sides could understand through their translators. The message said they were the Remnant Coalition, and the Council had violated Galactic Law Section 7, which was the right of ascension. The message explained that all developing species had the right to reach for the stars without interference from established civilizations. The Remnant ordered the Council to withdraw immediately or face sanctions that would destroy them. Thexelar's translator worked frantically to process what it was hearing. He said the name Remnant was impossible because they had been destroyed in the Convergence War 10,000 years ago. The reply came back immediately and said they had not been destroyed but scattered. The Remnant had been watching and waiting for species like the humans to prove the Council wrong. They had been waiting for a species to prove that diversity and conflict and struggle created strength instead of weakness. Another voice joined the broadcast, and this one was distinctly human. On every screen in every ship, the face of Jake Morrison appeared, and he was smiling. He said, "Surprise, we are not dead, and people of Earth should prepare for a long explanation." On the Indomitable, Kate Sullivan grabbed her console in shock and said his name like a question. Jake's image grinned and said it was a long story, but the short version was simple. After the Horizon's Edge was destroyed, the crew had been rescued by the Remnant. It turned out they had been monitoring the Council for centuries and waiting for a species to challenge their authority. Humanity was that species. The view pulled back to show the bridge of a massive ship, and Jake stood beside beings of species that nobody had ever catalogued. He said the Council thought they represented galactic civilization, but they were just one faction. The Council was a faction that had gotten comfortable and forgotten that progress came from challenge. They had forgotten that strength came from adversity. They wanted to eliminate humanity because humans reminded them of what they used to be before they chose peace over growth. Commander Sophie Grant appeared next to Jake and told Earth they had spent the last week learning about the galaxy beyond the Council. She said there were hundreds of species that rejected the Council's philosophy. They had been waiting for a catalyst and waiting for a species crazy enough to stand up to overwhelming force and survive. Ryan Clark added that congratulations were in order, because Earth was that catalyst and the galaxy was about to change forever. The Remnant Coalition commander spoke again and said the Council fleet had attacked a species under their protection. The commander said the Council had one chance to withdraw peacefully, or they would be forced to withdraw violently. Thexelar looked at his tactical display and saw that the Remnant fleet outgunned him 3-1. Their technology was clearly superior to anything the Council had. But to retreat now would be to admit the Council had been wrong about everything. Wrong about humanity, and wrong about their philosophy, and wrong about their right to judge other species. He said quietly that they could not withdraw because the Council's authority would be shattered. His advisor pulsed and said then the Council's authority would be shattered in battle. Thexelar considered his options and did something no Council commander had done in 6,000 years. He made a choice based not on orders but on what he believed was right. He ordered his fleet to stand down and power down all weapons. His tactical officer gasped in shock, but Thexler said he had fought the humans and watched them sacrifice everything to protect their home. He said they deserved to live and he would not be part of their extinction. Not all council ships followed his order and 70 vessels broke formation. They were commanded by officers who believed too deeply in the council's righteousness to accept defeat. They attacked the remnant fleet and the response was devastating and precise. The remnant destroyed the rebel ships in minutes, while carefully avoiding casualties on the other council vessels. The remaining council fleet retreated with their formation broken and their philosophy shattered by the reality of human resistance. On Earth, celebrations erupted in every city and every town and every settlement across the planet. They had survived against impossible odds and they had won. But more importantly, they had proven that humanity deserved its place among the stars. 3 months later, Earth joined the Remnant Coalition as a full member with all rights and responsibilities. The Council faced mass defections from species who had been waiting for an alternative, and they agreed to a truce. They began the long process of reforming their policies and accepting that they did not have the right to decide who lived and who died. Jake Morrison and the survivors of Horizon's Edge returned home as heroes, but Jake deflected all the praise. He pointed to Captain Danny Foster and the hundreds of others who had given their lives defending Earth. President Margaret Fuller addressed the newly formed Galactic Assembly, and her words would be remembered forever. She said the Council saw humanity's capacity for violence and called them dangerous, and they were right. Humans were dangerous to tyrants and oppressors and anyone who thought they could dictate who deserved freedom. She said they wanted to see the other side of humanity, and they saw a species that refused to surrender. They saw a species that fought when cornered and never gave up no matter the odds. She said that was not a flaw in human design but their greatest strength. On the rebuilt Horizon's Edge, Jake looked at the stars with his crew and knew they had changed the galaxy forever. They had shown everyone that humanity would not go quietly into extinction. They had proven that sometimes the universe needed chaos and unpredictability, and the human spirit. Sophie asked where they should go next, and Jake smiled. He said the galaxy was big and they had a lot of exploring to do, but first they had earned some rest. Ryan laughed and said he could use a vacation that did not involve being shot at by aliens. Jake said to give it time because something told him the universe was not done with humanity yet. The species had arrived on the galactic stage and nothing would ever be the same again.